Hey everyone, welcome to the latest podcast episode with Terry Knight. I have the amazing Alan Stein Jr. This man is an author, a speaker, and a performance expert coach. Okay. I mean, he taught one of the biggest stars out there, not Kevin Garnett, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and Kobe Bryant. I mean, the list goes on. And it must be amazing to work with them as well. But I'm just very grateful to have you on the podcast and looking forward for listeners to learn from you and possibly work with you to help with whatever they're stuck at.
Well, sounds great, man. I'm looking forward to a fun conversation and I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, Alan. Cool, man. So let everyone know where you're from.
So I live in a suburb of Washington, D.C. I'm in Gaithersburg, Maryland, which is actually where I grew up. So outside of my short stint in college down in North Carolina, I've been in this area my entire life.
Okay, cool. And where did you go to school?
I played basketball it was Elon College at the time. It's now Elon University in Burlington, North Carolina.
Oh, nice. Okay. And so throughout your college career and stuff like that, what made you want to get into, um, you know, working with these athletes at the time?
So basketball is my longest driving passion. I fell in love with the game at 5 years old, and I'm thankful here at 47 years old, basketball is still a major pillar in my life. And I spent the first portion of my life as a very dedicated player up through college. But while I was in high school and college, I started to develop an equal love for what we now call performance training. It was really called strength and conditioning back then. I was fascinated with ways that I could elevate my own performance, elevate my athleticism, elevate my mindset, elevate my nutrition, kind of do all of the things outside of the skills of the game to allow me to compete at a high level. So when I graduated from Elon and I realized that I did not have the talent to play professionally, I figured what could be better than combining my first love of basketball with this newfound love of performance training. And I decided to become a basketball performance coach. And it allowed me to stay very close to the game while still, working on these new areas that I was so curious and fascinated by.
Awesome, man. So you recalibrated like how you wanted to work closer with basketball. You loved the whole game. What made you want to focus the fundamentals? I know gave a great story, which I'll let you tell, but I found that so mind blowing. I was like, crap, like it's that simple, but no one really takes that into account.
Sure. Well, two things. One, as far as the path that I was on, I was given what I still consider to this day the best advice I was ever given when I was in middle school. And I had a coach tell me that the key to performance, the key to success, the key to fulfillment, really the key to everything we want in life is finding what it is that you really love to do. Find what it is that you have some natural talent for, some things you're naturally pretty good at, but then find where those two things intersect. And that point of intersection is called your strength zone. And if you can consistently pour into and work on and work within your strength zone, the things you love and the things you're pretty good at, that gives you the best chance to perform at a high level and have a real sense of enjoyment and fulfillment. So that point may change as you get older, and it certainly has for me. But basketball has kind of been that red thread that combines all of the different intersections that I've had in my life. So that was the reason that I knew pursuing something in that domain was the right fit for me. And, as I was on that journey as a player, as a performance coach, and even now as a speaker, I really had a strong respect and appreciation for the fundamentals, for the basics. The story you mentioned was the first time I met Kobe Bryant. I learned a life-changing lesson from him back in 2007. And that is the best never get bored with the basics, that the best are always working to refine and work towards mastery of the fundamentals of their craft, especially during the unseen hours. And, that philosophy and that perspective is in perfect alignment with everything that I do in my life. Whether I'm trying to be the best father I can be, the best speaker, the best author, I'm trying to focus on a handful of fundamentals and work towards mastery of those. And I say work towards mastery because I don't know that anyone ever masters any specific domain. I think we can all continue to strive for improvement, which I know is what I'm doing in all these areas of my life. But yeah, if you want to elevate your performance, the first thing you have to do is get crystal clear on what the basics are in that area and then work relentlessly towards improving them.
Cool. So when you work with these athletes and you're working on the fundamentals, have you ever had pushback like they're saying, nah, like I'm working on something else, like fundamentals. Like I got that jam packed. I'm good. I'm going to focus on this aspect.
It's yes and no. I mean, the really truly elite, they have that respect for the basics and the fundamentals. And just to clarify, if you're talking about a player like Kevin Durant, I'm not suggesting that they only do the basics. I'm asserting that they never leave the basics entirely and they continue to work on them. So certainly a player of Kevin Durant's caliber is going to work on some more advanced techniques and some more advanced moves, and he's going to push himself in a variety of ways, but he never leaves the basics. And in basketball, you're talking about your footwork, your shooting mechanics. Those are things that even to this day, although he's already proven to be one of the best scorers in the history of the game, he still works on those things relentlessly. But then he elevates and does some advanced techniques on top of that. So I also can acknowledge in my own experience and with the players I've worked with that the basics can feel mundane and they can feel monotonous. They can feel boring, but it's all on how you frame them. If you say that spending 15 to 20 minutes every single day with deliberate focused practice on the basics is the sacrifice that's required to get me where I'm trying to go, then players can usually dial in. It's when they don't see any value in the basics or the fundamentals that they feel the need to leave them. And, I would always say with a player like Kevin, winning doesn't get boring. Being great doesn't get boring. So I can understand that maybe some of these basic drills can be monotonous and mundane, but what they lead to is definitely not monotonous or mundane. So you have to be willing to make some of these sacrifices to get where you're trying to go.
Awesome. That makes a good point. And what's cool about your experience and everything you translated into the business side of it, you figured out, hey, this can work on an athlete level. Why not in any industry, right, that runs a business? What made you think that would work that way?
Yeah, well, the cool part about sports, and I think I've kind of known this intuitively ever since I was a kid, is the primary principles and lessons and disciplines that are reinforced and emphasized in sport apply to every area of life. I mean, even when I was growing up, I understood that the traits that would allow me to be a decent basketball player were the exact same traits that would allow me to get decent grades, were the same traits that would allow me to have decent relationships and friendships, would allow me to be good in any area. I mean, I had some hobbies and some things I would do outside of that. So I knew as I got older and more mature that the same principles would apply to business. And I've been self-employed my entire career. So even when I graduated from Elon, I started my own training business. So I've always worked for myself. So I've been a small business owner, now for well over 25 years. And I've seen firsthand that these same principles and the fundamentals come into play. And now that this is what I do for a living, where I'm actually, basically coaching and speaking to industries and businesses of a variety of sizes, it's the same recipe. We don't need to make things any more complicated. I'm a believer that, complexity undermines execution, that the more complex we make stuff, the harder it is to do. So I love keeping things as simple as possible. That's one of the taglines I use in my business is I try to simplify success. Let's brush away all of the things that are not required and unnecessary, and let's drill down on the things that are very, very specific and very needed in order to perform at a high level. And then let's just do those over and over and over as we continue to improve and develop and evolve.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. So when you focus on what's working, like how long does it take for a business to realize they need to stick to that area to make sure they can grow at a fast rate?
I'm glad you went in that direction. There's a few things that a business needs to look at. I mean, first and foremost, they have to be crystal clear on their North Star, their mission and their vision. What is it that they're trying to achieve? And once they get crystal clear on what they're trying to achieve, then they can take their eyes off of that outcome and they can focus on the process. That's when they need to work on being very specific in making sure that they've created a system and a process that will give them the best chance of reaching that outcome. And, they need to be crystal clear on what they're trying to achieve from the hiring standpoint. They want to make sure that they are only hiring people that are in alignment with what it is they're trying to achieve. And a good portion of that has to do with core values, has to do with culture, making sure that people's behaviors and beliefs are in alignment. So first and foremost, they got to get the right people on the team. And then they need to learn what each of those people does really, really well so they can put them in the right positions so that each person can make a maximum contribution to the greater good. Then they need to train and develop and empower and equip those people so that they're constantly improving. They need to make sure they're also holding those people accountable to doing their best work and showing up as their best self as consistently as possible, and then be able to offer real-time feedback. And when you can kind of string all of these things together, you attract the right people, you put them in the right positions based on their talent, you empower them and you push them and you encourage them, but you still hold them accountable. And now you've got everybody slowly swimming in the same direction, which will move you closer towards that North Star and that goal that you set.
Cool. Yeah, well said. I think that's the main point. When you, I guess, evaluate employees to see if they're the right fit for their culture or their core values, do you use something in particular to kind of help businesses establish that?
Well, one of the things is businesses have to be crystal clear on what it is they believe. And I know that sounds rather obvious, but there's lots of times that they don't have that clarity. And then they need to make sure that the person they're hiring is a culture fit, not just a resume fit. So it's not just on their technical skills, their education, their previous experience. That stuff is important, but they also need to make sure that these people are in alignment with their core values and vision. I think one of the best interview questions someone can ask when hiring someone is, which of our core values do you feel most aligned with? First and foremost, that'll show you if the person being interviewed actually knows your core values. Did they do some due diligence? Did they do some homework? Or did they just mass blast 300 businesses to try to get an interview? Did they actually take the time to say, this business believes in these things, and so do I? So that's step one. Then step two is then they can actually explain, why they feel alignment and why they feel that they would be the right fit. I try not to look at people or things as either good or bad or right or wrong. I think it's all about fit. I mean, you might be just the most remarkable candidate. You have an unbelievable education. You have tremendous work experience, unbelievable technical knowledge. But if you're not going to be a good fit for our group and you don't believe what we believe and you're not going to be able to play nicely with everyone else on the team, then it doesn't matter how talented or experienced you are. You're not the right fit for us. Now, that doesn't mean that you're bad. You may be the right fit for someone else, but it means you're not the right fit for us. So in business, hiring for fit, I think is, on a handful of things that are absolutely most important.
Cool. And when you see all those puzzles come together and everything is aligning, how much growth have you seen with revenue? Has it made a difference with these businesses?
Oh, it absolutely does. And yeah, depending on the business, depending on how old the business is, what type of business they're in, sometimes it can be a skyrocket immediately. Usually it's more of a more slow, systematic, incremental progression. And a lot of it has to do at scale, how many people are working for the team. But, really, and I say this all the time when I'm speaking to a group, that the very first step to improving the team is improving yourself. If you want our business to be better, then you need to be better. So, if you want our company to be more profitable, then you need to figure out how you can do things that make us more profitable. Have this attitude of extreme ownership. And, if you have 100-person company and every single one of them is making the personal commitment to level up their habits and their mindset and their focus, if each one of them wakes up every day taking pride in the role that they play on the team, they feel valued and respected and appreciated, and they wake up every day trying to make a maximum contribution to the greater good, you get 100 people doing that all at once, and you will absolutely see a massive uptick in every measurable of a business.
Cool. Yeah, you put it right on the mark. I believe that 100%. Just to get sidetracked there, like it's amazing that you work with these star athletes, right? Like we're talking Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and Kobe. What was probably the best thing you've learned from them, looking at each one of their how can I put it, their best way of practicing or taking things into account, right? The fundamentals. Like, was each athlete different? Did they kind of align on the same attributes when they started working with you? Like, was there some common ground where whenever you work with each one, like, wow, yep, that's the number one DNA?
Each of them certainly had their own individual differences as far as their personality and their temperament and their approach. But really, any high performer, whether it's a Kevin Durant or somebody that's a high performer in business, you start to see some of the same qualities overlap. Now, they may do them and showcase them and live them in different ways based on their personality. But there's a handful of things that you'll see from all of them. And I've kind of touched on a couple of them already, but I'll tie them all back together. The first, as we've said, they don't get bored with the basics. They respect the fundamentals. They acknowledge that doing the fundamentals isn't always the most fun thing in the world, but what the mastery of the fundamentals will lead to is absolutely fun, which is winning, or in business, being profitable and so forth. The second thing, and this one is really, really important, they've learned to blend confidence and humility. Each of these high performers is incredibly confident in their ability because they've earned the right to be confident, because they've put in millions and millions of repetitions during the unseen hours to deserve that confidence. But they make sure that they still brush that with a stroke of humility. And being humble is what allows them to stay open to feedback, to stay open to being coached. And being humble is what reminds them that no matter how good they get, they know they can still get better. So they don't rest on the comparison game. I mean, I think most basketball experts would agree Kevin Durant is one of the best pure scorers the NBA has seen in the last 15 to 20 years. He knows that, but he still goes to work every single day to work on his craft because he knows he can still get better. He's not resting on the fact that he's one of the best scorers to ever play. He knows he's still capable of more. And Kobe and Steph Curry and really any high performer is the same. So they've earned the right to be confident, but they blend it with enough humility that keeps them hungry to continue to grow and evolve. And then the last component I've also kind of touched on, but I want to pull on that thread again, is they're very driven by goals. They have dreams and things they want to accomplish, but they don't spend a lot of time focused on that. They spend much more time focused on the process, the daily behaviors, the habits, the mindsets, the micro skills. What are the things that I need to do to increase the chance of that happening? So, a guy like Kevin Durant has a goal of winning another NBA championship, but he doesn't wake up every day just hoping and wishing for an NBA championship. He wakes up and says, what do I need to do today to get me and my team closer to an NBA championship? If we're going to be in the weight room today, how can I make this the best strength training day? Or if today's a film session day, or today's a practice, or even if it's a day off, how can I get proper rest and recovery and eat, stuff of high nutritional value so that I'll be well rested so that tomorrow I can practice or play really hard? So they break it down into the micro and say, how can I get us closer today to that goal? And, when you can learn to respect the basics and work towards mastery of the fundamentals, when you can earn the right to be confident but still stay humble, and when you can get crystal clear on your goals but stay focused on the day-to-day and the process, you do those three things, regardless of your age or your industry or what your goals are, I promise you, you will start to make massive progress.
That's good points, guys. Everyone listening, take notes and, take action. A little bit off the subject, you mentioned Kevin Durant. He's with the Suns now.
Yes.
Do you think they have a chance to win a championship, you think, with Kevin?
Absolutely. It's been my experience the last several years in particular of watching the NBA that health has a major role in which teams are successful. And of course, in the NBA, we're talking about staying injury free, which I know has plagued Kevin in the last few years of his career. I mean, no one's arguing how talented he is. But if he's injured, then he's not able to make the contribution on the court that the Suns would need. And in this specific case, with DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker and Chris Paul, I mean, you've got 4 all-star caliber players. And yes, if all 4 are healthy and all 4 get enough time to work together and gel together, especially with Kevin being integrated in, they absolutely can win an NBA championship. But if any one of those pieces goes down because of injury, then there's a less of a chance. But the same could be said for several other different teams. So kind of like the parity we're seeing in college basketball right now, where we've got a Final Four with really only one traditional powerhouse and three non-blue bloods. I think we're seeing a lot more parity in the NBA. I mean, I don't know what the Vegas odds are at present, but I bet you there's about 6 to 8 teams in the NBA right now that could potentially win an NBA championship if they can stay healthy and if they can play well. And the Suns are definitely one of them.
Oh, okay. What about the East? What are you thinking?
I mean, the Sixers and the Bucks are both really, really good, but same thing when they're healthy. The 76ers with Joel Embiid and the 76ers without Joel Embiid are very different teams. Same can be said for Milwaukee. I mean, obviously Giannis is a superstar, but the Bucks when Chris Middleton is healthy is a lot different than with the Bucks when Chris Middleton is not healthy. So all of these teams need to do everything they can to keep their talent healthy and on the court.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about health so much. It plays an important role no matter what industry you're in. Have you ever had difficulties keeping up eating healthy or healthy habits
For
along your
me,
journey?
not so much. That's always been a part of my life. But the way we transfer this over to the business world, in the business world, we're not so much worried about somebody getting physically injured and not being able to report to work. I mean, of course, that is possible. But the same is true in business, except now we're talking more about mental health and mental well-being, not necessarily just the physical component. So if you're running a business and most of your team is having issues with mental health, or they're not prioritizing their self-care, so they're low energy, or they're starting to get burnt out, or they're in constant states of stress, that is going to detract from your team's ability to be successful. So, current business owners need to be just as focused on the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of their team as NBA teams do. I mean, it's just slightly different. The average business doesn't have to worry about ankle sprains and ACL tears, but they absolutely have to be focused on mental health and well-being. And the smart ones know that. And the smart ones take steps to make sure that their team has processes and encouragement and support in place to manage stress, to avoid getting stagnant, and definitely to beat burnout. So once again, there's a tremendous amount of crossover between basketball and business.
Oh, that's a great point. Something that came to mind with me is how would they deal with stress? Like, what's the best way of dealing with that?
Well, the first is to bring it to a level of awareness and to acknowledge it. One of the worst things we can do with any ailment is to suppress it or ignore it or just pretend it's not there, because all it will do is accumulate, build up, and at some point that bubble will burst. So I think it's okay for people to talk about that at work and to say, I know we've got this project we're working on, or we have this proposal we're trying to get out, and we're feeling the stress of that, and letting people know that, hey, you're not alone. Stress is a part of this, but let's come up with some ways where we can help take care of each other. Safe places where you can talk about the things that are bothering you and giving you fits. Encouraging self-care so people are getting physical exercise and getting adequate sleep and staying hydrated, doing all of the things they need to do to show up as their best self. And then most importantly, just reminding people that they're not alone. If a portion of our company, our group is working on this project, we're probably all feeling some stress from this, and it's not something that you're going through in isolation.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think maybe having meetings, would that help as far as making sure everyone's on the same page?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the meetings need to be productive. They need to be inclusive. They can't be time fillers or something where time is being wasted. We have to respect the fact that time is our most precious resource, and therefore our attention is the most important currency we have. So we have to make sure that if we're doing meetings, that there's something positive coming out of them. We're not just meeting to meet. And I think some businesses, unfortunately, fall victim to that. They think you just are supposed to have a meeting once a week, but they're not really doing anything that's productive or adding value or making people feel more included.
Oh, that's actually really true. Do you think meetings should be a certain time frame, 30 minutes, an hour? Like, what's your thoughts on
I
that?
think they should only be as long as they need to be. So in some cases, and it's hard sometimes to predict. I think it's very easy for groups to fall into a standard template and say every meeting needs to be 30 minutes or every meeting needs to be an hour. Hey, if a meeting only needs to be 12 minutes, then it only needs to be 12 minutes. You don't need to humor someone for the remaining 18 minutes just because you said it was a 30-minute block. Only say what needs to be said and eliminate all of the fluff. And then also make sure that you're only having meetings out of necessity. Don't just have a running meeting every Monday just to say that you have it. If there's nothing being productive, if there's nothing productive coming out of those meetings, then they're not worth it. And then also make sure that the people that are at the meeting are the ones that need to be there. I mean, there's nothing worse than sitting in on a meeting and you're like, I don't even need to be here. This has nothing to do with my job or my role. In fact, everything they've talked about for 30 minutes could have easily been summarized in an email in 3 bullet points. Now I feel like my time is being wasted or disrespected. So we want to really, really keep meetings tight, keep them clean. I use the example all the time is, use them the same way a basketball coach would use timeouts. Whether in high school, college, or the NBA, you have a finite number of timeouts. It's not an unlimited number. An NBA coach can't call a timeout every 2 minutes if he wants. You have a finite number. So think of the same thing with your business meetings. Don't think that you have an unlimited supply of them. Treat them as if they're finite so that you'll only use them when necessary. Then also make sure that you put time parameters on them. You have a 30-second timeout or you have a full timeout in high school, college, and in the NBA. So 30-second timeout is just a real quick gathering because we have something real quick to discuss and then get back out on the court. That strategy is different than when we have a full timeout and how we might use that. So same thing with meetings. And then most importantly, smart coaches, they don't use their timeouts to ruminate over mistakes or what was just happening. They use it to create strategies and give their players something they can use moving forward. So, we don't need to hold a meeting to talk about why our sales in October were down. We need to hold a meeting to talk about what we can do to improve our sales in November. And let's, have some measurable objectives and let's assign folks some roles and so forth. So yeah, be very judicious and strategic in how and when you use your meetings.
Oh, well said, man. Well said. I can honestly say I know a few businesses that do not implement half those stuff. So it sucks, but that's where you come along to help out and change the whole business around.
I try to, and I have nothing but compassion and empathy for folks that sometimes can get stuck. As humans, it's a fairly natural phenomenon that we do what we're used to and we fall into this trap of, well, that's just the way it's always been done, and I don't like that as an answer. That's my least favorite answer to why someone does something, but I certainly can understand it. And, if you've been running your business a certain way for a decade and you've kind of fallen into the trap of every Monday morning, we have a sales meeting. And if you can step outside of that now and go, you know what, I can acknowledge that the last few meetings have not been very productive. It's kind of draining the team's energy instead of adding to it. Well, you have the chance to recalibrate. You can change that whenever you want. Just because you've been doing it, you don't have to keep doing it. And, one of my favorite quotes and kind of ways to approach life is the key to being successful is to do more of what works and to do less of what doesn't. And I know that almost sounds like absurd that it's that obvious, but there's a lot of truth to that. And there's a lot of people out there that aren't taking notice to what's working and what's not. So sometimes they're just repeating things over and over that are offering minimal value.
Yeah, that's so true. You mentioned you're self-employed, you have your own business. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there. I'm one of them. What roadblocks helped you to get through the walls? Like what stuff you think would help out an entrepreneur that might be stuck on growing or just stuck overall? Like, because in business, everything is like a push and tug, right? There's a lot of things going on and you don't have the right path or the right fundamentals in place to move forward.
The most important part is just you have to know 2 coordinates, just like a GPS. You have to know where it is you are right now. So you have to have very high self-awareness. And if you're an entrepreneur that has team members, if you're building something, then you have to have team awareness as well. So you need to know right now at this point in time what things you and your business do really, really well and what things you and your business have opportunities to grow and improve. So you have to know exactly where you are at the moment. And then you also have to get crystal clear on where you're trying to go. In the GPS, that's the address that you're trying to arrive at. You can't be vague. I can't type into my GPS right now, I want to go to Chicago. Well, I live in Washington, D.C. Chicago is very vague. I need a physical address of where I'm trying to go. So the more clarity you can have and the more you can pinpoint exactly where you want to go, then when you have these two coordinates, now you want to come up with a strategic path to connect those dots, a roadmap, a blueprint of where you're trying to go, but very similar to a GPS, just have the humility to acknowledge that you're not going to get there in one straight shot, and that there's going to be plenty of times where you make wrong turns or you get off on the wrong exit. And just like a GPS, all you do at that point is you reroute, recalculate or reroute, which is what our GPS says to us when we make mistakes. So maybe you thought doing this was going to be a good move for your business. You find out that it wasn't. It was a little bit of a misstep. That's okay. Wherever you are at that point, now we got to start creating that blueprint. And once you have that process in place, then just do all of the stuff that we've talked about in this conversation. Focus on the fundamentals, keep earning your confidence, but staying humble, stay focused on the process. If you're trying to grow something bigger than being a solo entrepreneur, make sure you're bringing the right people onto the bus and make sure you're putting them in the right positions. Do everything you can to pour into them and encourage them and support them and push them, but still hold them accountable. Make sure that everybody's beliefs and behaviors are in alignment. And if you start melding all this, then just take notice of what stuff is working and what stuff you need to refine. And to me, that's the whole fun part. The fun is not necessarily the destination. That can be fun, but if you can find fun in the journey and the path and the blueprint and the work and the process, then you've already won in advance. And that's really the approach I try and take.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I'm sure it's something personal, but like I had left foot reconstructive surgery. And just like what you mentioned with Kobe, he kind of tied it in with what you were saying, like enjoy the process where you are now and always improve every single day. Like don't be hard on yourself, but just continue to work on the basics and you'll start improving day in and day out. And I think I learned that from Gordon Hayward when he had that awkward ankle spill like years ago, right? It was pretty horrible.
Oh, yeah.
And that was probably the best wisdom I ever caught from Kobe at that time, even now. So it's pretty cool that you're referencing like how that would work with, companies and businesses.
Love it.
But yeah, does Alan have anything else coming up this year? Do you have any other things coming up?
No, my primary focus is on growing my speaking business. I mean, that's the epicenter of what it is that I do. And, things like books and social media content are all done to kind of support that. So, this was a lot of fun, great conversation. If anyone listening, if you're ever looking to hire a speaker or have someone come in and run an event for your team, my website is alansteinjr.com. If you're interested in either one of my books, Raise Your Game or Sustain Your Game, you can find those at Amazon or Audible or wherever you get books and audiobooks. And then I put a tremendous amount of time into putting out social content. I'm very active and very responsive and accessible on social. And it's just at Alan Stein Jr. On Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So if any part of our conversation struck a chord or if someone wants to ask a question or needs whatever, just shoot me a DM on Instagram or on LinkedIn and I'll make sure to get back to you.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone that's listening to this podcast, Alan gave you guys a blueprint on how to scale your business and how to pivot, right? How to reroute yourself. So again, reach out to him. Great individual. Appreciate you, Alan, for coming on and just sharing your experience and what you're all about. And yeah, man, everyone just keep a lookout for Alan. He's going to be up there in all those speakers and you're going to see him blow up on social media. And you hear it here first. So
thanks, Terry.
All right. Thanks, Alan.